The following is a shortcut from episode 13 of The Other Side Australia, your weekly shortcut to Australia's best commentary. A new podcast to bring you up to speed on the news and views of the week, especially designed for Aussies, that uploads every Friday morning on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all good podcast platforms. This shortcut was first uploaded as part of episode 13 on Friday, November 20. And joining us now is Alexandra Marshall, the queen of Australian libertarian, classical liberal and conservative Twitter. Alexandra, welcome to the show once again.
Thank you for having me. It's a wonderful evening.
All right, we have a fair bit of news happening in Australia that I want to whip through. First of all, this astounding story about the CEO of Nine Media, Hugh, who had to quit, not because he was having a Me Too type relationship with anybody, but simply because he had a relationship, a consensual relationship, wasn't even an affair. He was single, she was single. She was a very, very senior executive at Nine, and both of them had to quit. Extraordinary story.
Yes, and the longer this story goes on, the more of a non-event it becomes. So at first it was meant to be some great Me Too scandal that the press latched onto. And now that the real story is coming out from the participants actually involved in the affair, it amounts to absolutely nothing other than two people who had a relationship and they both decided to leave the company basically on their own terms. They didn't even try to fight or find a way around what could be a potential conflict of interest because they were both prepared to leave. So it's not like there was some great scandal and they were forced out. It really isn't even particularly newsworthy at this point.
It does speak, though, to this HR culture, the way that corporations are operating these days in this paranoid, overreactive kind of manner. I mean, what happened here, and Alexi Baker was the woman who had the relationship with Hugh Marks. Nothing scandalous about it, just two normal adults having a relationship and dating. And she was went into the Australian newspaper this week and said quite clearly, "I am not a victim. You know, I'm a strong woman." And she said that the narrative that's out there that Hugh Marks is a blokey bloke. This is from the Australian, a blokey bloke from the Macho 9 culture, where everyone is a bit of a pants man. He'd been having sex with underlings. Baker is merely the latest, and when people found out she lost her job, because it's always the woman who loses her job, except that he's now lost his job too, blah, blah, blah. That's the narrative, says the Australian, and Baker says quite clearly it is completely false. That we'd worked together on some heavy deals. They got to know each other, and they decided to enter into a relationship, and that's all it was. Why couldn't they just go to the board and say, "Look, we're in a relationship. We want to disclose it, and we hope it's okay." And she said the answer to that was she was ready to leave the company anyway, so she was quite happy to leave. So even the beat up of the Me Too angle that, the woman has to be the one who quits when there's a mutual relationship, even that wasn't valid.
It has always been my opinion that this kind of Me Too scandal that comes out in the press regarding these high-profile positions is about power, not about whether or not someone was a victim. In this case, there's a reason you only ever hear about it for these high-profile positions, and that's because they need to find a way to get rid of successful people who are sitting at the top of these enormously profitable businesses. And there's no easier way than to get the press to make up a story like this and spin it out of all proportion. I mean, I come from two small businesses, both of which are family-run. The directors and staff are married, and inside those businesses there are heaps of relationships, both official and non-official, going on all the time. And you never hear about this kind of stuff because there's obviously no political traction in it. And this is also the reason why not just big executives like this story, but politicians are the other victims of this kind of Me Too scandal, because their jobs as MPs are highly coveted by a lot of predatory competition amongst their peers.
So you're saying that sometimes these stories are beaten up or publicised in order to remove people from senior roles by people who want their jobs.
Absolutely. That would be the vast majority of these cases. And that is
Wow.
why you hear about it in politics, and that is why you hear about it in these big corporations. I mean, they seem to forget that the rest of the country and the rest of businesses, they deal with this sort of thing as a mundane day-to-day activity inside the business. Like, I mean, I remember that if two people were dating each other inside a business, they would be completely ignored. If there was a complaint made or it became obvious that two people have decided that they now hate each other and can't work together, which happens, by the way, outside of romantic relationships. There are people who cannot have a professional relationship anymore for other reasons. Well, then that is dealt with by head office in a fair and reasonable fashion, and it doesn't result in this kind of victimhood culture that we see going on amongst the press gallery's favourite pets. And it really is a nasty culture between clickbait for the press and advantageous peers who want other people's jobs.
Yeah. Well, this one was particularly interesting because there was the Fairfax Media owned by Nine, of which Hugh Marks was the CEO, that broke the so-called scandal story. So quite
so
bizarre
you'll find me very cynical on this particular topic.
It would be good for the Me Too movement to come out and actually defend people who are in this position a little bit. It might bring some credibility back to their quite damaged cause. Anyway.
As an ex-power woman in a profession, all I can say is I wish the Me Too movement would vanish from existence, because it is destroying our ability to be employed and to hold high positions in office. It's the worst social movement we've had in generations.
You don't think that it was necessary that there was a culture for, I'm not talking about cases like this, but cases where I worked in a very, very blokey, macho culture company, couple of them actually, and I did see situations where, young women in particular felt a little bit uncomfortable and pressured.
No, absolutely not. I mean, it was already changing. So don't forget, we had a hangover from centuries of male-dominated industries. Now, women were then creeping up the corporate ladder, and it was obviously going to take a while for this transformation to take place. And what we should have been doing, and what I always trained my staff to do who were young women, was to handle those situations better, to assert themselves and to act in a way which would gain them respect and show their work off via its merit, and certainly not to climb the corporate ladder via this whole social justice politics rubbish where you become a quota girl. So it had to come from for example, my mother was a power woman of the 60s. It has to come from the way you train young women and girls to behave in the workplace, not some kind of hashtag social movement, which is all tied into litigation and therefore does not have the best interests of women at heart. It has the best interests of making money off women at heart.
And that was a shortcut from episode 13 of The Other Side Australia, your weekly shortcut to Australia's best commentary. A new podcast to bring you up to speed on the news and views of the week, especially designed for Aussies. To hear the rest of episode 13 and the rest of this interview, check out all the full episodes on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and all good podcast platforms. And subscribe so you don't miss an episode when we upload every Friday morning. It's free.